Keanu Reeves stepped into a high-end motorcycle boutique, and within moments, a staff member tossed a rag at his chest, barking, "If you're not buying, start cleaning." Laughter erupted as they mocked his boots and his silence, attempting to eject him from the store. However, when the manager returned and recognized who they had just humiliated, his face went pale. As rain drizzled over the sleek glass facade of Cavalier Motors, it cast silvery streaks across the showroom windows. Inside, the atmosphere was warm, the floor immaculate, and the motorcycles displayed like priceless artifacts, each priced like a small apartment. Polished chrome reflected luxury, power, and exclusivity, with everything in the place exuding the message, "If you have to ask, you can't afford it." The door creaked open, allowing a gust of wind to enter with a man clad in a faded black hoodie, damp jeans, and boots caked in mud. He moved quietly, almost reverently, brushing rain off his shoulders as he stepped inside. His head was slightly bowed under a worn cap, and slung over his back was a canvas tote bag with frayed edges and a faded logo. Hope Initiative. No one greeted him. Behind the glossy service counter, a young receptionist named Ivy looked up, blinked, and leaned toward her headset. Someone just walked in. "I think he's lost," she said, keeping her eyes on him as he slowly walked past a Ducati Panigale V4, ignoring the flashier displays. Instead, he drifted toward the back corner where an older black motorcycle stood silently on a minimalist pedestal. It wasn't labeled, nor was it for sale, but the man stopped in front of it and simply stared. "Hey, Bryce," Ivy said into her headset. "He's touching Vincent." From the upstairs lounge, a man in a fitted blazer and leather shoes strode down with calculated annoyance. Bryce, tall and sharp-jawed with slicked-back hair, moved like someone who considered the showroom his personal stage. He gave the visitor a quick scan. Rain-soaked, unshaven, wearing clothes that looked like they had been slept in, Bryce muttered under his breath, "Homeless mechanic or lost delivery guy." Keanu Reeves didn't react to the footsteps behind him. His fingers gently brushed the edge of the Vincent Black Shadow seat, as if touching a photograph of someone long gone. Bryce cleared his throat loudly. Keanu looked over his shoulder. "You can't be back here," Bryce said, his tone clipped. "We don't allow customers to touch display pieces, especially not that one." Keanu gave a small nod. "I understand. Just admiring the craftsmanship." Bryce scoffed. "Sure, let me guess, you're here for someone else or just looking." There was no hostility in Keanu's face, just calm, tired eyes. "Actually, I had a question about this bike." Bryce raised an eyebrow and looked at Ivy behind the glass. He smirked and walked over to the front desk. "Hey, Ivy," he said loudly enough for half the store to hear. "Do we have a charity test ride program for guys with trash bags?" Laughter erupted from two nearby customers. Keanu stood silently as Bryce leaned back on the counter, arms crossed. "Don't worry, man, we've got something for every budget. I'll get you a towel or a mop." The man in the hoodie didn't flinch. He looked back at Vincent one more time and whispered to himself, "Still here. Good." He turned slowly and deliberately, walking toward the center of the store. No one knew yet that he wasn't lost. He was home. The rain had eased outside, but inside Cavalier Motors, the air remained heavy with quiet disdain. Keanu Reeves moved past a gleaming row of Triumphs and Harleys, his eyes fixed forward. Every step he took left faint damp marks on the showroom's pristine tiles, marks that Bryce, now hovering by the espresso bar, watched like a hawk. Keanu didn't care. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He stopped once more before the Vincent Black Shadow. The bike sat like a relic from another time, its matte black finish and hand-restored parts housing an engine that once ruled the Bonneville Flats. Its presence in the store didn't make sense. Not here, not among this overpriced excess. Keanu knelt beside the rear wheel, eyes narrowing. There it was, a single scratch on the chrome swing arm, barely visible beneath the shine. He knew that scratch. He had made it himself back in 2015 when he helped load the bike into a crate bound for the Valor Memorial Museum in Oregon. That was where this bike was supposed to be. Not in a showroom, not with a price tag. He stood slowly, gripping the tote bag slung over his shoulder. Inside was the original certificate of donation, stamped, signed, logged. His fingers tightened around the strap. 8 years ago, he whispered. We gave this to honor the ones who never came back. Flashback. A wide desert under the morning sun. Keanu, dressed in simple jeans and a khaki jacket, shook hands with a man in a wheelchair beside the restored bike. The man's name was Danny Whitaker, a veteran who had lost both legs in Kandahar. Danny had helped restore Vincent in Keanu's personal garage. When they finished, Keanu donated the bike under Danny's name. Not everyone needs a statue, Keanu had told him. Some just need to know they're not forgotten. Back to the present. The fact that this very bike was now sitting in a high-end boutique, unlabeled and up for silent auction, meant only one thing. Someone had stolen it. Someone had forged papers. Someone had funneled it out of the museum and into private hands. And now those hands were trying to turn history into profit. Keanu exhaled slowly. He didn't come to make a scene. He came to verify, to be sure. And if he was right, he'd call Mao, the manager of Cavalier Motors, an old friend and a man he trusted. Mao had been away for weeks. Keanu didn't want to stir anything until he had proof, but Bryce and the others weren't giving him the chance. They were too busy mocking the man with muddy boots and silver in his beard, thinking they were above him. They didn't know who he was or what the spike meant. Not just to him, but to a man who gave everything in a war no one talks about anymore. Keanu looked around the showroom once more, then reached into his tote and pulled out the envelope, the proof. He didn't need to raise his voice. The truth would do it for him. The quiet hum of ambient jazz played from invisible speakers as Keanu stood near Vincent, holding the envelope in his hand. The showroom smelled of waxed leather, espresso, and arrogance. Customers drifted between motorcycles as if browsing fine art, glancing at spec sheets, admiring paint jobs they'd never scratch, snapping selfies beside machines they didn't understand. That was when Bryce returned. This time he didn't bother with subtlety. Still here, Bryce said, walking up with an oily grin. Listen, man, I don't know what kind of daydream you're having, but this isn't a museum. Keanu didn't answer. His eyes remained on the bike. Bryce followed his gaze. You've been standing there for 10 minutes. Either buy something or stop breathing on the merchandise. Still no reply. The silence unnerved Bryce more than any insult could. He looked around. 2 affluent customers were nearby, one sipping an oat milk latte, the other scrolling through photos of their yacht. They noticed the interaction. Bryce smiled, playing to the crowd. All right, he said louder now. I'll bite. What's so fascinating about that old hunk of metal? You into scrap? Or is this some kind of vintage cosplay thing? Keanu finally turned his head. His voice calm. Where did this spike come from? Bryce raised an eyebrow. It came from our collection, private acquisition. You wouldn't understand the channels involved. I might. Oh yeah. Bryce stepped closer. And you're what? A blogger. A motorcycle historian on TikTok. He laughed and glanced at the others, fishing for approval. Keanu didn't flinch. That bike was never meant to be sold. Bryce's eyes narrowed slightly. Excuse me. It was donated to a memorial for veterans years ago. It was meant to stay there. Oh, I see what's happening. Bryce crossed his arms. Let me guess you're trying to claim it. What's next? You'll say it used to be yours. Keanu didn't answer. He opened the envelope and held out the certificate. Yellowed edges, faded ink, but very real. Bryce snatched it from his hand. What is this? Proof. A long beat passed as Bryce skimmed the paper. His lips tightened. He wasn't trained to recognize subtle cues like the embossed logo of the Valor Memorial or the signature of Colonel James Rowe at the bottom. But he knew enough to realize this wasn't printed at home. Still, his pride wouldn't let him back down. This proves nothing, he said, tossing the paper back toward Keanu. It fluttered to the floor, landing at his feet. Then Bryce crossed the line. He picked up a nearby microfiber cloth used to polish the showroom bikes and tossed it at Keanu's chest. If you're going to loiter, at least make yourself useful. That rear tire has a smudge. Chop chop. Someone giggled. A phone camera clicked. Keanu looked down at the cloth in his hands, then slowly up at Bryce. His eyes weren't angry. They were steady, old, heavy with something Bryce had never carried. Memory, the kind that doesn't need to shout to silence a room. The moment stretched. Keanu stood perfectly still, the cloth hanging from his fingers like a challenge he had no interest in accepting. All around them, the atmosphere shifted from quiet mockery to something colder, more calculated. Bryce had scented blood, and now he wanted a show. "Don't just stand there," Bryce barked, pointing toward Vincent. "You said you liked the bike. Show us how much. Start with the rims." A few customers had turned to watch now. One man in a cashmere trench coat smirked, sipping his espresso. Another younger customer raised his phone slightly, the red light blinking. Keanu bent slowly, not toward the bike, but toward the envelope still lying on the ground. He picked it up, gently brushed a smudge off the certificate, and slipped it back into his tote bag. Then he stood again, his face unreadable. Bryce scoffed. "Oh, come on. You're really going to pretend that scrap of paper means anything? You think you can just walk in here with a raincoat and an attitude and what? Guilt tripped me into handing you a collector's item." Keanu tilted his head slightly, his eyes steady. "I'm not here for guilt. I'm here for the truth." More laughter now. A blonde woman in heels nudged her friend and whispered, "Did he say truth?" Bryce leaned in, just inches from Keanu's face. "Here's some truth," he hissed. "No one cares who you are or what you think this bike meant to someone. You don't belong here. Not with that bag, not with those boots, not with that face." And then, with deliberate cruelty, Bryce plucked the microfiber cloth from Keanu's hand and threw it across the floor like garbage. "Go find the janitor's closet," he said louder this time. "We've got oil in the back. Maybe you'll feel more at home." Keanu's posture didn't change, but his silence did. It thickened the air across the room. A junior staff member named Lena, barely 20, watched with a nervous frown. She'd seen celebrities before. This was Los Angeles, after all, but something about this man was different. Not his clothes, not his voice. It was the weight he carried, quiet like a man who had endured far more than a rude salesman on a rainy afternoon. Still, Bryce wasn't done. He gestured toward the door. "Security's not here yet, but I'm sure we can speed things up unless you'd like to mop the floor first." Keanu looked at him one final time, not with anger, but with something deeper, pity. Then he turned toward Vincent once more and said quietly, "You have no idea what you're standing next to." Bryce laughed, turning to the crowd. "Oh, I think we do." But at that exact moment, the store went quiet. The front doors opened again, and the only voice that mattered finally spoke. Bryce. Everyone turned, and Bryce turned pale. Before we continue the story, if you enjoy this and want to see more stories about Keanu Reeves, drop the number 8 in the comments to let us know. The voice cut through the showroom like a scalpel. Sharp, unmistakable, and immediately unsettling. "Bryce." It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. All heads turned at the entrance, where a man in a dark camel coat stood. His shoes still wet from the rain, salt and pepper hair, a jaw that had weathered wars, and eyes that had no patience for arrogance. A leather name badge on his chest read, in discreet gold letters, Mao Duca. For a split second, Bryce looked like a child caught with matches near a gasoline pump. "Mr. Duca," he said, forcing a smile. "Didn't expect you back until." "I came early." Mao stepped forward, each stride deliberate. His eyes weren't on Bryce. They were on the man standing silently near the Vincent black shadow. "Keanu?" he asked, his voice softening. Bryce froze. Keanu gave a slow nod. "Hey, Morrow." The room shifted again. Whispers started like static. "Keanu. Wait, is that? Oh my God, it is." Customer dropped their phone. Someone at the espresso bar gasped. The young girl, Lena, covered her mouth, eyes wide. Bryce's mouth opened, then closed, then again, as if his brain had short-circuited. Mao walked past him without a glance. "I'm so sorry, Keanu," he said. "I just got off the plane, and the moment I saw the internal inventory log, I came here." "You found it?" Keanu nodded and pointed to the bike. "It's the one Danny and I restored. Still has the scratch under the swing arm." Mao exhaled, visibly shaken. "We had no idea it was stolen from the Valor Memorial. Someone forged transfer documents. I'm opening an investigation immediately." He turned slowly now, looking directly at Bryce. "You sold this." Bryce stumbled. I didn't know it was. It just came through private channels. You thought you could humiliate a man who's given more to this community than you'll earn in your lifetime." Mao's voice didn't rise, but the steel in it chilled the room. "You mocked him, disrespected our guest. You mocked a donor, a veteran supporter, and a friend of this store." Bryce took a step back. "I didn't know who he was." "That's exactly the problem," Mao said. "And with that," he nodded to security, who had finally arrived. "Escort him out. I want his key card, his access revoked, and a report on my desk within the hour." Bryce's face flushed as he was led toward the exit. He turned once, muttering, "It was just a bike." Keanu didn't even look at him. Instead, he turned to Mao and asked quietly, "Can we get it back where it belongs?" Mao nodded. "We'll deliver it to the museum ourselves." The store was silent again, but not from tension, reverence. No one said a word as Keanu gently reached out and placed his hand on Vincent's seat, this time with the whole room watching. The Vincent black shadow stood in solemn silence, surrounded by the weight of realization. Keanu's hand rested gently on the seat, not possessively, but like a man greeting an old friend. The tension that had choked the showroom just minutes before evaporated, leaving in its place something heavier. Respect, guilt, awe. Mao cleared his throat and turned to face the room. "For those of you who don't know," he said, voice firm but composed, "Keanu Reeves doesn't just ride motorcycles. He restores them, donates them, builds them with his own hands." Vincent stood behind him. He and a disabled veteran spent 2 years rebuilding it as a tribute. It was given to the Valor Memorial Museum in Oregon. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Mao stepped closer, his tone quieter now. "The man who helped him restore it passed away last year from cancer. The bike was part of his legacy. Somehow it was stolen, sold, trafficked through back channels, and ended up here under our roof." Keanu remained quiet. He didn't bask in the attention. He didn't need it. He'd already said what mattered. Mao continued, glancing around. "This store was founded on the idea of honoring craftsmanship, legacy, and the road that built us. If we forget where these machines came from, or worse, who they were meant to honor, we lose more than a sale. We lose our soul." Across the room, customers stood still. Phones lowered, coffee cups went cold in unmoving hands. No one dared break the silence until Lena, the young staffer, took a hesitant step forward. Her voice wavered. I watched the ceremony years ago. You gave the speech. I remember the part about the 2 engines that never stopped running. One was the bike. The other was Danny's heart." Keanu looked at her for the first time. His eyes softening, he gave a quiet nod. "Yeah, that was him. He was the kind of guy who could fix anything, except the time he ran out." Mao placed a hand on Keanu's shoulder. "We'll take care of everything, the paperwork, the shipping, the press if needed. You shouldn't have had to walk in here and defend that bike or yourself." Keanu's eyes moved across the room. Some customers looked down, ashamed. Others just stared, stunned by the reversal. A few quietly recorded. Less for spectacle now, more for reverence. This wasn't just a viral moment. It was a correction, a reckoning. Keanu took a slow breath. "Just make sure whoever forged those transfer papers doesn't get to do it again." Mao nodded grimly. "We're already on it. Then Keanu turned, letting his fingers trail one last time over Vincent's seat. Danny used to say, "A bike's just a machine until someone gives it a purpose." He'd hate seeing it behind glass. Mal smiled. "Then we'll ride it back ourselves." Keanu's lips twitched the faintest smile, and for the first time since stepping into the showroom, he turned toward the door with the quiet dignity of a man who no longer needed to prove anything.